All right. Hello and welcome back to another Deck Tech with Mr. Pisto. Today we are looking at Thassa, Deep Dwelling. If you've watched my other videos, you may have noticed that we are doing all the monocolored commanders first. I've picked one of each color and we're going to go through them. We have blue and red, no, blue and black left, sorry. And I have picked Thassa Deep Dwelling as my mono blue commander. She is a legendary enchantment creature god for 1 blue and 3 colorless. And as long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 other target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. So there's a lot of enter the battlefield effect type creatures that work well with Thassa. And also, an added bonus, you can play a blue and 3 colorless to tap another target creature. Now, let's go into the deck. Thassa's Oracle. You have 2 blue for a 1/3 Merfolk Wizard, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your devotion to blue. Put up to 1 of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, so you get some card selection. So flickering this is quite nice, especially as you get more permanents in play. If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your deck or your library, you win the game. I haven't had that happen yet, but maybe that will be something that'll come up. Thieving Skydiver, 1 blue and a colorless for 2/1 creature Merfolk rogue with flying and kicker of X, where X can't be 0. When Thieving Skydiver enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. So you can take their arcane signet, you can kind of see it on the bottom of the screen, or any one of their artifacts. And there are lots of good artifacts, and there are some decks that really use equipment. So by stealing something, it is quite nice. Next we have Eliros Enraptured. For 2 colorless and a blue, you get a 2/3 legendary creature human, and it enters the battlefield tapped. And he doesn't untap. During your untap step, if you control a reflection. And when Eliros enters the battlefield, create a 3/2 blue reflection creature token. So, it enters the battlefield, you get your 3/2, Thassa in play, comes back in, you get another 3/2. So you have a nice creature thing going on there. Next is Cloudkin Seer for 2 generic and a blue. You get a creature elemental wizard 2/1 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Pretty simple in that respect. Then we have the Glass Pool Mimic, or Glass Pool Shore, one of those dual land spell cards. You get a 2/0/0 creature shapeshifter rogue, and when it enters the battlefield, it becomes a copy of a creature that you control. So with Thassa, you can have a creature in control, bounce, and then choose which creature is best for you to copy. After that, we have the Wave Break Hippocamp. It's an enchantment creature horse fish. Very cool card. That's a 2/2, and whenever you cast the first spell on each opponent's turn, draw a card. So it works with all the instants and the flash type cards in the deck. Baron Tolarian Archmage is a 2 blue and a colorless for a 2/2 legendary creature human wizard. And when he enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. And if you bounce your own, you draw a card. So with Thassa, if Thassa's in play it, bounce something, end turn, bounce something. So the initial, if you have a Thassa in play, the initial effect is bouncing 2 creatures, and that can be game sometimes. Next up is the Brazen Borrower. It's a dual, one of those adventure instant cards. For a blue and a colorless, you can return target non-land permanent to an owner's return target non-land permanent opponent controls to its owner's hand. And then for 2 blue and a colorless, see, we're not all perfect. Sometimes English is hard. You have a flash flyer 3/1 that can only block flying creatures. Then we have 3 generic mana for the Sky Scanner artifact creature Thopter. It's a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Gadwick the Wizened. There's a little bit of a wizard theme to the deck, and when it enters the battlefield, draw X cards. And whenever you cast a blue spell, you can tap a non-land permanent and opponent controls. So on their turn, you could cast an instant to tap something, or on your turn, you can cast almost every spell in the deck to tap something so you can get some damage in. Then we go to Sharinx, the Raging Isle. I kind of put this in as a fun card. I wanted to give it a try. It's a Leviathan Crab. And spells your opponents cast that target Sharinx, the Raging Isle, cost 2 generic mana to cast. You can pay 3 to give it plus X minus X until the end of turn, where X is the number of islands you control. There are 20 islands in the deck, so it's very rare that you can actually kill it by using its ability, and it can hit for big damage. Solemn Simulacrum, or Sad Robot, 4 generic mana. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the play tapped. So if you're cycling through with Thassa and this, you just land, which is nice because blue doesn't have that much ramp unless you use artifacts. And when it dies, you draw a card. Then we have the Shipwreck Dowser. It's 5 mana with prowess, a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So there's quite a few of those in the deck, so it works well. Stormwing Entity, flying in prowess. For 5 mana, 3/3, costs 2 and a blue less to cast if you already cast an instant or sorcery spell. And when it enters, you scry 2. Sir Elnora the Discerning. It's a legendary creature. It's a star 4, and its power is equal to the number of cards in your hand. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. And same idea with Sharinx. Spells your opponents cast that target Elnora cost 2 generic more to cast. Then we have the Voracious Great Shark, 5 mana for a 5/4 that counters target artifact or creature spell when it enters the battlefield and has flash. Just a big beater that counters something. Right, that's the creatures of the deck. Now we go to the meat and potatoes of a blue control-ish deck, the instants and sorceries and planeswalkers. So we have Opt, 1 blue mana, scry 1, draw a card, instant. Stern Dismissal. I'm playing this over the other 1 mana bounce spell because unsummon, because you can bounce enchantments too, and sometimes blue has a trouble with that. I know it's not your own, it's only your opponent's, but I think the downside of that is bigger, or the upside of creature or enchantment is bigger than just bouncing your own thing. Anticipate, looking at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Confounding Conundrum, stopping those pesky green ramp decks. So when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under a component's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, you return a land they control to its owner's hand. So it makes ramp spells not as good. Essence Scatter, instant, counter target's creature spell. Into the Royal, 2 blue with kicker of a blue and a colorless, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If it was kicked, draw a card. Medomize Prophecy, so an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, stage 1 is scry 2. Stage 2, you choose a card name. Stage 3, when you cast the spell with the chosen name for the first time, you get to draw 2. Stage 4, look at the top card of each player's library. Then we have our classic negate, counter target non-creature spell. Omen of the Sea, a 2/1 blue and a colorless enchantment with flash. And when it enters the battlefield, scry 2, draw a card. Nice instant speed card draw with scry. And then you can sack it for a blue and 2 generic mana to scry 2. Arcane Signet, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity, so it's 1 blue for 2 generic mana. This one I thought would be kind of fun to try. So there are a few wizards in the deck, and as you can see, quite a few instants and sorceries. So blue hard removal, other than enchantment, doesn't really exist very much. So by being able to pay 2 and tapping it and removing those counters, I've been able to blow up a few things. So it's kind of blue hard removal, which is nice. Thassa's Intervention. So you can choose one so it's 2 blue and X. Look at the top X cards of your library, put up to 2 into your hand and the rest on the bottom of the library in a random order, or counter target spell unless its controller pays twice X. So you're drawing 2 cards, or you're selecting 2 cards from the cards you look at, or you're countering a spell. So all in all, everything's a plus. Jace Mirror Mage, one of the very first planeswalker to have kicker. So it's 2 blue and a colorless, and you can pay 2 colorless as a kicker cost. And if you do pay the kicker, you get a copy of Jace Mirror Mage, but it's non-legendary and it has a 1 loyalty. So it's +1 and scry 2. So if you're really needing to dig, you can scry 4 times, or you can scry 2 and then you can draw a card and you lose, or you remove counters equal to the converted mana cost of the card that you draw. So scry a land to the top, draw it, doesn't lose anything. Cancel, 2 blue and a colorless counter target spell. Pretty straightforward. Silundi Vision or Silundi Isle, one of those dual land spell cards again. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You can reveal an instant or sorcery card, put it in your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you can dig for something, or it can be a land early in the game. Midnight Clock, a blue and 2 colorless for an artifact that taps for a blue mana, or you can pay 1 blue and 2 colorless to put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. And at the beginning of each upkeep, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. When the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards and exile Midnight Clock. So it's ramp and it's late game card advantage. Then we have Inscription of Insight. So it's a 1 blue, 3 colorless, and it has kicker of 2 blue and 2 colorless. So for 8 mana, you can choose all 3. For 4 mana, you can choose 1. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hands. Scry 2, then draw 2, and target player creates an XX blue illusion creature token where X is the number of cards in their hand. So ideally, you're paying the 8 mana to do all 3 things, or if you're really stuck on lands, you're scrying 2 and drawing, or if you're behind, you're bouncing 2 things. I very rarely think that you would just play it for the XX. So that's Inscription of Insight. And another planeswalker in the deck, Teferi, Master of Time. So you can activate his abilities on any player's turn, anytime you can cast an instant. So you get to do things twice. So you play it, you plus it, and on their turn you plus it again, and you're drawing cards and discarding cards, or you're making a creature phase out. So treat it and anything attached to it as though they don't exist until its controller's next turn. So you can plus it on your turn, minus it on their turn, and for a full turn cycle, whatever creature that you phase out doesn't exist. And if you ever get to the -10, you get to take 2 extra turns. I haven't done that yet, but that would be kind of fun. Then we have Sublime Epiphany, 2 blue and 4 for an instant. Choose 1 or more. counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. Most of the creatures have entered the battlefield effects, so it's good to copy something, and drawing a card. So it does so many things for 6 mana. Then we have Kiora Bests the Sea God. So it is a Saga enchantment for 2 blue and 5. You get an 8/8 creature token with hexproof. You tap all non-land permanents target opponent controls, and they don't untap during the controller's next untap step. And then step 3 is you gain control of a permanent and untap it. So it doesn't matter if it's tapped or untapped, you just gain control of their best thing. And the last spell in the deck is Ugin the Spirit Dragon. I consider him Ugin the game ender. Normally, if you're far enough ahead and you cast Ugin, people will just scoop and we'll go on to the next game. But it's 8 mana for 7 loyalty planeswalker. +2, Ugin the Spirit Dragon deals 3 damage to any target. -X, each permanent with converted mana cost X or less, that's 1 or more colors, goes away. And -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, and put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. I've ultimated him a few times and game over. Ugin, if you can get it down, it is game over. Then you have Castle Vantress for 2 blue and 2 mana. You can tap it to scry 2. It adds blue, and it comes in the battlefield tapped unless you control one of 20 islands. So it almost always enters the battlefield untapped. And one of the only ones of these check kind of lands that I actually quite like to play is the Mystic Sanctuary, especially in a deck with as much instants and sorceries as this one has. When it enters the battlefield, if you don't control 3 islands, it enters tapped, and if it enters untapped, you can put a target instant or sorcery from your graveyard on top of your library. Alright, that is Thassa Deep Dwelling. So this one took a little longer. I went a little more in depth over the cards and didn't talk quite so fast, I guess. Well, thanks for watching, and wherever you are, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Bye bye for now.